The Christian Smart Case. Everything you need to know about the case. My friend, this case is full of frustration and fascination, full of failure, interrupted with success. Well, we're going to talk about this and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Well, what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to another episode regarding the Christian Smart Case. Now, we have spent quite a few weeks on this case because, my friend, it is truly an amazing case. One with ramifications, as you're going to see and are here in this episode. I do like to take an opportunity, though, to especially welcome any new listeners to Charlie Crime Buster Podcasts. Hey, do me a favor, please tell your friends about us. And if you like, give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform if you feel we deserve it, of course. Like us on your social platforms. You see, my friend, all of that, well, it helps us get the word out. You see, on Charlie Crime Buster, we share true crime almost always with lessons you can apply to your life to keep you and your loved ones safe. Now, we present our podcast on true crime from a cop's perspective. And we are bold about our support of our nation's heroes. That is, law enforcement, first responders, and the military. Not saying that all these heroes are perfect, but we do not hesitate really to point out those shortcomings, by the way, in our podcasts. Even of our heroes, they're not perfect people. But we do believe that the men and women who put themselves in danger, well, they deserve our support. And so I'd like to direct you today to peacemakernetwork.com, where you can become a badge, B-A-D-G-E, badge supporter for as little as $3 a month. And to show our appreciation, well, everyone that signs up as a badge supporter on this week's publication date, well, if you do it within 7 days of this podcast, you're going to receive a vacation voucher worth over $500. That'll help you and your loved ones have a much-needed getaway. There are people who are going to help us help you so that you can help us. Again, for as little as $3 a month. Go to peacemakernetwork.com and see what we do to help the nation's heroes, and we invite you to be a part of it. And your help, of course, helps us publish our podcast, Charlie Crime Buster. Now, before we get into today's focus, let me point out to you there are other podcasts we publish on the Christian Smart Case. Actually, we first told you about this case around 2 years ago. That's when it was really questionable whether this case would really go to trial. But yet, here we are, in the midst of a trial. And so, for our listeners from the East Coast to the West Coast and beyond, you can catch up at charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com. Of course, these links will be in our show notes. First, let's do a review of the facts of the case. On May the 24th, 1996, an attractive young 19-year-old freshman, Kristin Smart, well, she left with friends to go out on the town to celebrate the Memorial Day weekend, as college students do. Now, soon into their journey, Kristin separated herself from her friends. Kristin wanted to attend a birthday party on Crandall Way. Her friends did not want to attend that party, so they departed ways. And this party on Crandall, well, you know, it was there in the area with student housing was, not very too far from the dorms. So Kristin was on her own at the party. And as she sometimes did, along with others, she used an alias name to share with others. I guess that was to avoid unwanted advances in the future. So at that party that night, she introduced herself as Roxy at the party. Now, as the evening went on, she appeared to many people to be impaired, and interesting enough, while some saw her drink, they saw her drink very little. Others said they did not see her drink at all, but yet she was impaired. And there are a number of people that, in addition to her drinking, well, they believe that she was drugged that night at the party. Well, whichever, it is apparent to most that she was definitely under the influence of something that night. And there was another person at that party, a young man by the name of Paul Flores. He, too, drew the attention of others, however, in a not-so-good way. This young man by the name of Paul, he was described as weird and creepy. And Paul was giving to what others thought was unwelcome attention to Kristin Smart. Though interesting enough, his statements to law enforcement that evening about his actions, well, he denied that he was interested in her at all. He actually said she wasn't his type. Now, later in the evening, Kristin was seen by another young man, this guy by the name of Tim. He had actually helped organize the party. And as the party was breaking up, he saw her laying on the lawn next to the party house. He said she appeared to be cold. And she said, now get this, she just wanted to go home. There was another young lady by the name of Cheryl, and she joined Tim in helping Kristin to her feet. They began to walk her home. Now, Tim testified in court that as Cheryl and they were helping get Kristin on her way, as he and Cheryl were helping to get her on her way, that all of a sudden Paul Flores, that other young man at the party, he appeared, according to Tim, seemingly from nowhere, and he joined them in helping walk Kristin to her dorm. A short distance later, Paul and Cheryl indicated to Tim that they could handle it, and he could go his way helping get others home. He did say, Tim did, as he left, he looked back to make sure that Paul was able to hold Kristin up since she was not able to walk on her own. He actually described holding her up as kind of like a sack of potatoes. So now we have Cheryl and Paul, creepy Paul. They were helping Kristin along. Then Paul, he told Cheryl that he would walk Kristin onto her dorm. According to her, he tried to kiss her, tried to hug her. When she refused, well, she declined. She said she may have shook his hand. But again, she described his actions as, quote, unquote, weird. So Cheryl then separated onto her own room to her dorm area, leaving Paul to walk Kristin on. Now, both Cheryl and Tim have already made statements that Kristin was no in condition to walk on her own. Yet, according to Paul Flores, he said when he came upon his dorm, he says, well, he went his way, and she went her way. According to him, she walked into the night, never to be seen again. And my friend, again, all she wanted to do was to go home. But she did not make it, my friend. Now, later on, when Paul was questioned by the police as why he did not walk her all the way to her dorm, well, he replied, I did not think about it. Probably, in my opinion, because Paul, creepy Paul, he was thinking about other things that he wanted to do with Kristin that night. So Paul Flores, he becomes first a person of interest in the investigation. Then next, a suspect in the investigation. And now, a defendant in the case. The case that is now on trial and being heard in court. He is charged with murder in the disappearance of Kristin Smart. Remember, my friend, her body has not yet been found. And as a sidebar, I would encourage you to get caught up if you've not yet heard our episode. Our episode on how the police could have found her body early on. I believe they could. You can find that one at charliecrimebuster.com. It's called Kristin Smart, How the Police Could Have Found Her Body. Now, in everything you really need to know about this case, let's continue about how this case is somewhat unique from other cases. And, of course, that does bring us back to the fact that this case is being tried, get this, without a body. You see, even though murder charges without a corpse are rare, they really are rare, what you might not know is that nationally, about 86% of all no-body murder cases that go to trial, 86%, get this, results in convictions. And that, my friend, is compared to all murder cases with conviction rates of around 70%. Now, those stats come to us from A&E, a true crime blog. And this is even though a corpse is considered the most crucial piece of evidence. Something else interesting? Since 1843, more than 500 known no-body murder trials have been held in the United States. That's trials without the body. Now, the reason for that high conviction rate, you might ask yourself, in these no-body trials, well, according to experts, it is that when you do not have a body, well, then you're going to need overwhelming evidence to prove your case. The question is, in the Kristin Smart trial, where Paul Flores has been charged by murder, the question is, will the evidence in this trial be overwhelming enough to lead to a conviction without a body? Now, there's another unique part of the trial, and that is that there are two people being tried at the same time. Paul Flores for the charge of murder, his father Rubin Flores, charged with accessory after the fact. And along with two defendants, two juries. These juries will even take turns sitting in the jury box, as to sitting in other designated areas for the second jury. You might add to this, there's no audio recordings or visual recordings that are being published at this time of the trial. So, nope, you will not be able to see this live on court TV or anywhere else. We have to depend on the reporting to the press that are allowed in the courtroom for our trial information today. Now, in just a moment, we're going to share with you what the prosecution hopes will be that overwhelming evidence. Overwhelming evidence in a trial without a body. But now it is time for what we call at Charlie Crimebuster our crazy crook story, to try to lighten the load on this haul. And our crazy crook story, well, it's not only a crazy one, it's a strange one. And of all the crazy crook stories, well, this probably is the strangest. It's about these twins, Siamese twins from Czechoslovakia, Inio and Mario Borvak. You see, these 35-year-old brothers were joined at the stomach and chest, and they shared vital organs. But, unfortunately, they also shared breathing space, and Mario, he had bad breath. Now, Inio tried to tell Mario to do something about his breath, but Mario he would not brush his teeth. Mario finally got tired of the lectures, slapped Inio in the face. And Inio, he plotted his revenge. Perhaps without thinking, he got a gun, shot his brother, and 20 minutes later, Inio, he bled to death. Now get this. Well, the police belatedly, they charge Inio. They charge Inio with first-degree murder. Although really, when you really get to think about it, shooting his brother, it was really technically suicide. And that, my friend, is our strange, crazy crook story of the week. Now back to our main focus. So Paul's father, Rubin, he is also being tried alongside his son. Hey, let me ask you a question. If your son accidentally killed someone on purpose, would you help him cover it up? It is kind of amazing sometimes what a father will do for his son, but what would you do? Well, covering it up, that's exactly what Rubin is accused of doing, allegedly. And there is evidence to back up those charges. First, there was the early morning phone call on the night and early morning in question of Kristin's disappearance. You see, his wife, Susan, she had told her co-workers the next week that on that early morning in question, Rubin received a phone call that woke him up from sleeping. He immediately got out of bed, dressed, and rushed out. Many believe that call was from Paul, and that Rubin rushed to his son's side. You see, that phone call has not yet been explained by the Flores family, to our knowledge. Then there was the oops to his own statement. Yeah, the oops statement. No doubt that he made without thinking when he said to investigators who were preparing to search for evidence from his wife and daughter, he said, well, why search them? I'm the felon, not them. He's the felon. Well, next in evidence, unfortunately, the jury probably will not hear. Well, they will not hear that there was a civil trial. In that civil trial, where Kristin's parents brought a wrongful death suit against the Flores family, Rubin Flores there, he pled the fifth. Yep, the fifth. In response to all the questions. Now, it is true that it is the right of him and the right of all of us in this country, you see. We have the right not to say anything to incriminate ourselves. But why was he afraid of incriminating himself? Well, fodder for us, right? But the jury probably won't hear that point, for sure. But there is what I call the smoking gun in Rubin's trial. Yep, the smoking gun in Rubin's trial. You see, the investigators finally got around to searching Rubin's property the right way. The right way. They brought a ground-penetrating sonar in, along with soil analysis. Well, it picked up the fact that it appeared that there had been a body buried under the deck of his porch. See, they could see what looked like a grave. The grave had been there, the same dimensions of a grave. And then the soil was disturbed again, covered up. You see, they also found in that soil, they found material likened to the decomposition of a body. You see, my friend, even though maybe she had been buried in a tarp or something like that, bones, physical parts would not be released in the soil, but you can't keep the decomposition of a body. That indeed could seep into the soil, and that is what they found. See, it appears that she had been buried there, and then they dug her up and moved her somewhere else. You can see that with the sonar penetration, the ground sonar penetration tool they used, and the analysis of the soil. That, to me, my friend, along with everything else, well, I believe that's the smoking gun for Rubin. In my mind, pretty overwhelming evidence. What do you think? Next, let's talk about how Paul is linked to the murder. Is that evidence overwhelming? Well, of course, big time is his M.O. We call that the method of operations, the way that he operated. A pattern, if you please, for you to better understand. You see, Paul, no doubt about it now, he drugs women and he has sex with them. And sometimes he rapes them. You see, they're unconscious. They can't consent. That is according to the testimony. The testimony, get this now, of 29 women. 29 women have now come forward with accusations against Paul about how he stalked them, how he drugged them, how he tried to rape them, and did rape some of them. And when they did that search, wow, get this, they even found recorded videos of him having sex with drugged women. And that, my friend, is rape. When women are unconscious and unable to consent, it is rape. And even though, according to the judge, not all these testimonies will be allowed, there will be maybe a couple, maybe three, that followed the pattern would be allowed into this case. Then there is the black eye. Yep, the black eye, the scratches that were observed on him after he had been seen with Kristin. And not only the black eye and the scratches, but the way he tried to explain them. No doubt he was lying. Can't say it three different ways like he did. So he told others, including investigators, he said, first of all, he got it at a pickup basketball game. But when that one was knocked out of the water with witnesses who said no, he had it before the game. Well, it changed to he got it working on his car, trying to remove a stereo. Another time he told somebody, well, he got it because he was at a party and someone shoved him. And then again, believe it or not, he actually said, I just woke up with it. I said in one of the past podcasts, no wonder his attorneys told him to shut up. Don't say anything. Well, all of this was all over the place, but thankfully his black eye was documented by police photos. He'll not get that thrown out. It's evidence. Methinks. Well, something's not quite right about this. How about you? Then we have the cadaver dogs brought in. It was a blind search. In other words, the handler did not know where Paul's room was in those dorms. Yet, the dogs, they hid at his room, hid at his mattress, and several other spots in his room. And those dogs did not hid in other rooms. One of the dogs, well, he had quite a successful record of finding dead bodies. And remember, this dog was not alone. There were other dogs involved as well. And then again, there's the same way as Rubin. He, too, Paul, he refused to answer questions in the civil case on the grounds it might intend to incriminate him. Nope, though that will not be allowed, but other evidence will. Here's another one, an eyewitness. An eyewitness that was riding his bike early morning, he said he saw two people that absolutely matched Paul and Kristin's description of what appeared to be a physical fight. That's in one of the common areas in the area of the dorm. Then, of course, there is the smoking gun that I call, in Paul's case, unfortunately, not going to be allowed in. You see, my friend, he had a willingness to show prosecutors, get this, according to his representatives, he was trying to work out a deal now where if he would show prosecutors where Kristin's body was, he'd do it if he could get out without any jail time. And of course, prosecutors turned that down. And unfortunately, it's all protected speech that will not be allowed in the trial. But if he knows where her body is, he knows how it got there. And he knows how she died. Well, with that is allowed, do you think that it is overwhelming evidence? Well, I believe it is. The next question I guess we have to ask ourselves, if they have this overwhelming evidence, why? Why has it taken it this long to come to trial? And we're going to answer that in just a moment, but right now it's time for what we call our Courageous Citizen of the Week. We like to recognize those who show courage. Citizens. Courageous citizens. This one comes to us from one of my hometowns that I lived in for a while, the Richmond, Virginia area. I used to work some with the Chesterfield County Police there in the Richmond area. Wonderful time. And police in Richmond, well, they announced Wednesday morning that a hero citizen, a hero citizen, actually helped them prevent a potential mass shooting way back here a few weeks ago on July the 4th. You see, Police Chief Gerald Smith, he said at a press conference that officers received a tip on July the 1st from someone who had overheard a conversation about a mass shooting being planned at the city's July the 4th celebration at Dogwood Dell. That's an amphitheater there in a park. So police, along with Homeland Security agents, and they brought along a special investigation team, well, they made entry into a home that same day. There they found 2 assault rifles, 1 handgun, 223 rounds of ammo. That was all in plain view, that's according to Smith. Then they arrested this guy, Julio Dubon, 52 years of age. They charged him right off the bat with being a non-U.S. citizen in possession of a firearm. There was a second suspect, a guy by the name of Roman Balarkal. He actually was 38 years of age. They were not able to arrest him at that point, but they did keep an eye on him, surveilled him for over the long weekend. And then on July the 5th, well, Roman, he too was arrested. Now faces the same charge. Now, according to Smith, these 2 guys were roommates. And Smith went on to say that their intent was to conduct a mass shooting. But the officers do not, at this time, have a clear motive. So, my friend, this unnamed citizen hero up there in Richmond, Virginia, unnamed citizen hero becomes what we call our Courageous Citizen of the Week, because he saw something and said something and saved lives. from preventing. He actually helped prevent a mass shooting. And that, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Courageous Hero of the Week. Now back to our main focus. The delay has been in part due to the way police handled this at the very beginning. First, there was the back and forth with people concerned for Christians' safety, and they went to the police, but they were handed off. Back and forth between the campus police and the Obispo police. That delay in taking this missing person case seriously, that she had disappeared, after all, it was Memorial Day weekend. They thought, well, she probably ran off with some other guy, and on and on and on. But that delay, as well as the jurisdictional battle of the agencies, well, it's a part of the reason that it's taken this long to bring it to trial, because in those early times, important critical evidence was missed. But there is some good news as well. You see, there was introduced a couple of years later what is called the Christian Smart Campus Safety Act. That was in 1998. It was passed, and now it requires there in that area in California, community colleges and universities, well, they have to have in place written agreements with local law enforcement that outlines the operational responsibilities for violent crime to be investigated on college campuses. Now, the violent crime, it includes willful homicide, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and would, of course, include missing persons with foul play suspected. Now, this would avoid the tragedy that Christian parents faced with their own investigation into the disappearance and the death of their precious daughter. Now, another good thing to point out, it was a podcast. Yep, a podcast produced by Chris Lambert. It was called In Your Own Backyard. And that podcast, my friend, was really the driving force to bring this case to trial. That's why we joined with him 2 years ago, to bring some sort of focus to this terrible tragedy. It was his investigative reporting, though, that brought to light and brought public evidence, and that evidence then impacted local law enforcement and prosecutors to bring this to trial. So hats off to fellow podcaster Chris Lambert, who did a great service to this country. And it is the public's involvement now that gave this case new legs. So there are lessons. The lesson today is simple. If you see something, say something. I guess this is also a good time to mention once again the National Sex Abuse Hotline. That's 1-800-656-4673. They have over 1,100 ways to give support nationwide, and it is 24/7 coverage. Again, if you've been sexually assaulted and need help, call them today, 1-800-656-4673. If you know someone who has been sexually assaulted, give them the number. Help them make the call, 1-800-656-4673. It can make a difference. So, our focus today, a trial without a body requires overwhelming evidence. Do you feel it is enough? Well, we're going to see. The trial is still going to last several more weeks. And the evidence that is presented, well, no doubt it will be challenged. And two juries, one for each, will decide the fate of Paul Flores and Rubin Flores. Well, my friend, let me say to you, keep your children safe. No one should have to face what Christian's parents had to face. And until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster here, reminding you, be safe, be alert. Well, for the life you save, it may be your very own.